All right, let's start over again. It's a great honor to be here with you today. Thank you for inviting me. Okay, we're gonna be exploring some new ideas on how the world is changing and how things are shifting and different than there have been in the past, and how they're going to be much different even 5 or 10 years from now. So, let's see. There we go. What I want to do first is I want to show you a video. And this is a video of a cartoon that everybody in the United States saw as a child. When I grew up as a child, I saw this cartoon many times, and it's about the future. And I'm going to show this to you, and then I'm going to tell you a quick story about it. Can we turn the volume up on that? A little less volume? All right. So this is a cartoon that came out in 1962. This is the Space Needle in Seattle. The Space Needle in Seattle came out in 1965 at the World's Fair in Seattle. Now, it's not a coincidence that the Space Needle looks like a lot of the buildings on that TV show, The Jetsons. Now, when it came out in 1962, this is something that all the kids started watching, and this got us excited about the future. It was intended to portray life in 2062, 100 years in the future. So I was asked this question: if we were going to recreate that cartoon, that introduction to the Jetsons, that's 1 minute long, if we were going to recreate that based on our understanding of 2062 today, how would we go about creating that? Now, then they brought in Hollywood filmmaker Justin Lin, and there was 4 of us that consulted on the recreation of this cartoon, this intro to the Jetsons. And so what I'd like to do is show you what the new version of that looks like now. Now, we did this for a company called the Arconic Corporation, which is a spin-off of Alcoa Aluminum. They wanted to use this as a marketing tool to portray themselves as being on the cutting edge of the future. It was kind of a brilliant move on their part. But the reason I showed you this is just to get to this core central point that our understanding of the future is continually changing. Every year forward, we have a different view of what the future is going to look like. So let's talk about future industries. So I made this prediction a few months back. I wrote a column on this idea that all of our industries are going to be changing, and every new industry starts as a micro industry. It starts very small as one or two businesses. And over the next 2 decades, we're going to have over 100,000 new micro industries that come out of the woodwork and get started. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the shoe industry. This is something that we can all relate to. Now, this is the former managing editor of Wired magazine, Chris Anderson. He says that when the tools of production become available for everybody, everybody becomes a producer. And this is what's, I think, real interesting, because all this emerging technology is giving us the tools of creation. It's giving us the ability to create new and different types of products, new and different types of services, new industries that we never imagined possible in the past. So every year, 21 billion pairs of shoes are sold around the world. 21 billion. That's a huge number. That's almost 3 pairs of shoes for every person on the face of the earth. Now, the projections are that within just 5 years, that 5% of those will be smart shoes. Now, smart shoes mean different things to different people, but within 5 years, the prediction is that we're going to have 1 billion pair of smart shoes sold every year. So if we think about smart shoes, that in the future we're going to have shoes that have pores that open and close on the sides of our shoes to keep the temperature even on our foot. If we have expanding polymeric gel packs on the bottom of our shoes so that they expand and contract to give an even pressure on the bottom of our foot, that we're able to track every nuance, every movement inside of our shoe, every step that we take, lots of information, lots of statistics. And this is going to give rise for tons of little micro shoe industries. And each of these smart shoes are going to pertain to a specific niche that doesn't exist. So we'll have people that make smart shoes specifically for the lacrosse industry, people that play tennis, people that are left-handed, people that are mountain climbers, people that are amputees. All of these are going to have specific shoes that are designed for them, and this will give rise to some very interesting kinds of shoes in the future. These are the forward-backward shoes here. Shoes that we never imagined possible, and they're going to have lots of capabilities built into these shoes. These are the lounge chair shoes here. This one actually has a bird in the shoe here. And so virtually everything we can imagine in a shoe is going to come out in a different light with a lot more creativity. So as an example, if we like to go jogging at night, when we step outside, our shoes will suddenly realize that it's dark outside, and so our shoes will then automatically signal for a drone to fly overhead and to light up the path in front of us. Now, because these are smart shoes, they're also going to authorize a payment of $50 an hour or whatever it's going to be. Because our shoes are smart, they can authorize payments as well. And it doesn't just have to be for jogging at night. If you're walking in the rain, it can also authorize an umbrella drone to fly overhead and keep the rain off of you. See, we're a very backward-looking society. We're backward-looking because it's just human nature. Each of us has already experienced the past. As we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. In fact, all information we come into contact with is essentially history. So the past is very knowable, and yet we're going to be spending the rest of our lives in the future. So it's actually, we're walking backwards into the future. My job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So how does the future get created? Well, the future gets created in the minds of everybody around us. We all participate in creating the future. Certainly some of us have more influence than others, but people make decisions today based on their understanding of what the future holds. So I use this phrase quite a bit: the future creates the present. This is just the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that what we're doing today is going to somehow create the future, but from a little different perspective, it's these images of the future that we hold in our head determine our actions today. So here's the key thing: if we change somebody's vision of the future, we change the way they make decisions today. That's my promise to you. Before you leave here today, we're going to change your vision of the future, and as a result, you're going to walk out of here making different decisions. I get asked a lot if I have a crystal ball, and yes, I do have a crystal ball. It was sitting around at home, and my wife says, "Why don't you just take this to the office? It's just collecting dust." So I was no more than about 4 or 5 minutes down the road, and I looked over and I saw that my crystal ball had started to fire on the seat next to me. Now, this is with the sun shining in. A crystal ball is a giant lens, and so it's had this little science experiment going on the seat next to me. Luckily, I was able to put the fire out, and it didn't cause any serious damage. But then I had this revelation, this huge revelation, and obviously it came from my crystal ball. And the revelation is that the newspaper headlines the next day were going to say, "Futurist killed by his own crystal ball," and he didn't see it coming. So this is my disclaimer. I don't see everything. As Larry Page says, the reason most companies fail is because they miss the future. I happen to agree with this. Most of the companies today are getting blindsided by new technology, and they don't see it coming. Now, when we look at this idea of innovation, there is disruptive innovation that's disrupting existing industries, existing products, and there's catalytic innovation that's creating entire new industries. So in the past, we had things like catalytic innovation was like things like electricity, automobiles, airplanes, sewing machines, telephones, photographs. All of these went on to create entire new industries, billion-dollar, even trillion-dollar industries. But here's the thing: all industries are a bell curve. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yes, all industries eventually end. 1,000 years from now, every industry we have today will have been replaced multiple times. The other key thing to remember is that most of the profitable industries we have today end up being in the second half of the bell curve. They're constantly being forced to do more with less. So if we ask this question here, which category of micro-industries will start affecting education the soonest? The correct answer for that is all of them. All of these emerging industries are going to start affecting education. And so pay close attention to them. Now in 2012, I run the Da Vinci Institute in Denver, Colorado. And in 2012, we started our own coding school to train people how to become computer programmers. So we called it Da Vinci Coders, and it was 13 to 14 week courses, and we would teach people how to program in Python and JavaScript and Ruby on Rails and game design. and they would get enough experience so they could get an entry-level job in the programming world. But a micro college like this is an immersive form of post-secondary education done in a short period of time. So this is just a loose definition of what a micro college is. This is one of our classes. One of our instructors, they were teaching people how to do JavaScript here. And then at the end, we'd give them a certificate so that they could take with them to show to prospective employers. Now, we looked at this idea of micro colleges, and we think that they're going to go off in 1,000 different directions over the coming decades here. If you want to teach people how to become a crowdfunding expert, how to design parts for 3D printers, how to become a drone pilot, how to become a brewmaster for a brew pub, lots of different options, and we think that this is going to be very popular in the future. But there's so many things that currently are not being taught in schools anywhere. So this idea of distraction management, gig management, relationship management, and I'll go through these in a little bit: relevancy management, awareness management, fan club management, digital toolbox management, time management, communication management, and privacy management. The key word that all of these have in it is management. This idea of being able to manage different aspects of our lives that we currently can't manage today. So if we look at the very first one, distraction management, this is like the biggest problem we have today. All the young people are very distracted. In fact, 74% of all young people, the millennials and the Gen Zs, 74% say that they're constantly being distracted. And in fact, a real small segment, 16%, say that they're virtually distracted all the time. There's too many bright, shiny objects in the world, and they can't pay attention to the thing that they're supposed to focus on. So how do you focus and maintain your attention on the thing that's important? Gig management. Forbes magazine did a survey recently. They said 73% of young people now are deciding, rather than to get a full-time job, they're just going to go into becoming a freelancer. That means that they'll take control over their own destiny. But virtually nobody is teaching these people how to become effective freelancers. See, if you're a freelancer, you need tons of skills, and this idea of managing the business of you is very tricky. So how to set up your own company, how to price your services, how to find gigs, networking, writing proposals, negotiating deals, writing contracts, like setting up an accounting system for yourself, doing marketing, doing sales, scheduling, project management, deliverables, and what do you do as project completion? How do you wrap things up? All of these are critical skills that are necessary, and this is the direction we're headed. So lots of young people need to learn all of these skills, and they're not being taught in one concise format. From my perspective, I think we're moving into an era of superemployment. I think we're going to have more jobs in the future than ever in all history. The problem is they're all going to be gigs. They're all going to be projects. And so how do we manage that type of lifestyle? We have a lot to learn here. Relationship management. This is becoming a very confusing issue because in the past, there was a British psychologist, Robin Dunbar, that looked at all of the relationships that people have in the world, and he concluded that it was roughly 150 strong relationships is that what the average person had. This became known as the Dunbar number. But since that time, we had the invention of Facebook, we had the invention of MySpace and Twitter and LinkedIn. And so this idea of a relationship suddenly got distorted into tangential relationships, weak relationships, and And so now it's really difficult to understand what constitutes a good relationship. And we have people that, because of the technology, they're feeling very lonely. And there's people writing about this problem of a loneliness epidemic. Roughly 5% of the population of the world now feels very lonely most of the time. So relevancy management. How do we stay relevant in our ever-changing world? So what does it mean to stay relevant? If you ask these questions, what special contribution do I bring to the table? What separates you from everyone else? What are you known for, and what is it that people want? Do you have a special talent for dealing with people? This idea of, do you have a sense of what the future holds? Can you make the tough calls? Can you make sense out of complex situations? With new tools, systems, processes, or management, how quickly can you adapt? How do you stay relevant in the world ahead? Awareness management. The average internet user is consuming information 12 hours and 7 minutes every day. That means we're much more aware of everything happening around the world than ever before in all history. So how do we manage this awareness? We can get sucked into these little things that are happening in remote places in the world and then lose control over our daily lives. Fan club management. Everyone has people that care about them, their own personal fan club. Our ability to grow, study, and interact with these people is a powerful tool that can be leveraged in many ways. So your ability to take this group of people that cares about you, to grow it, to expand on it, to keep communications flowing back and forth with this group, that is going to determine to a large extent where you're going to end up in life. Digital toolbox management. What technology should I be paying attention to and what can I ignore? This is a challenging set of questions that come out with all the emerging technology. Do I have to pay attention to all of it? Can I ignore some of it? This is a hard question to answer for most people. Time management. Virtually everything that we use to manage our time in the past is getting very dated. It doesn't make sense in this new emerging world. So the systems of the past are beginning to morph, shift, and change to accommodate lifestyles and business demands of the future. Communication management. How often should I communicate with the people that care about me? How often should I write back? How quickly should I respond? And then communication is all about the who, what, when, where, and how, and why. And so how much do I inform these people and how often? And then privacy. Privacy is becoming such a tricky topic right now. There's lots of people who are radical transparency advocates. They think if we know everything about everybody, that we'll live in a much safer world. But see, if I know everything about you, then I'm going to know what your credit card numbers are. I'm going to know what your bank account numbers, what your passwords are. And so suddenly we lose our ability to own things. And so we need some sort of a privacy bubble around every person in the world. But that privacy bubble, that concept hasn't been defined legally. It hasn't been defined technologically or culturally. And every new emerging technology tends to pierce the privacy veil. So this is continuing to be a source of irritation for us as we move along. So we now have the ability to be far more unique, niche-focused, and specialized than ever before in history. So this is something that we've not had ever before. And so how do we manage our own hyper-individuality? Because we're unique individuals, we should celebrate the fact that we're different than everybody else. But then how do we manage it? So I put down a few notes here on this idea of the blockchaining of education. And these are just a few pieces of a much larger equation. But this idea of an open source university, right now all of our universities have been set up around standalone institutions. And this idea of standalone institutions is limiting in so many different ways. But if we could accept, if we had education system, secondary education system that would accept learning experiences from everywhere and give us credit for it, that makes much more sense. We'd be transitioning from institutional credentialing to global credentialing, working from professionals establishing unique next generation standards for each profession. So each of these things are going to start changing in such unique and different ways. This idea of microcredits is one that I love to play around with. If we take the idea that each college credit is worth 100 microcredits, and then what if we read a book and we took a test and we got 14.7 microcredits? What if we watched a movie and we took a test and we got 3.4 microcredits? What if we listened to a series of podcasts and took a test, then we get 7.6 microcredits? This idea of credentialing, each of these learning experiences that goes on in our life is unique and different than this notion that we have to go sit in a classroom and listen to this professor drone on and on about some topic that you're not interested in. This is a different way of thinking about what might be coming next. And then what are some alternative forms of credentialing? Rather than a college degree, what if we could get awards or certifications, or what if we could get licensing? And right now, there's a lot of certifications that you could get in less than a year that will actually earn you far more money than getting a college degree. They take less time, they cost less money, and the earning power just goes through the roof. The tech world really doesn't care what kind of credentials you have. They just care whether or not you can do the job. There are several other industries that are moving in that direction. In 2012, I gave a talk in Istanbul at a TEDx event, and I made the prediction that by 2030, over 2 billion jobs would disappear. Now, this was never intended to be a doom or gloom statement. It was never intended to say that we're going to have 2 billion people unemployed in the world. It was intended to be a wake-up call. It was intended to tell people that we're going to have to create new jobs at a faster rate than ever before. Now, I get quoted on this in newspapers, magazines, TV stations, literally all over the world. This is what I refer to as the level problem. Now, this is a tool that most of us have in our home, in our garage. We use it to hang pictures straight on the wall. We use it to do carpentry work. But once we can download a level app on our smartphone, then a lot of us don't have to buy that tool. That means we don't have to make as many aluminum frames. We don't have to make as many glass bulbs. We don't have to have as many people doing the assembly work, the shipping, the receiving, the retail stores that are handling it. Every time we download a mobile app, we eliminate a piece of a job. It's a very, very tiny piece. But once we start downloading billions upon billions of mobile apps, we're eliminating lots of jobs. Oxford researchers in 2013, they came in and they looked at 700 different occupations. They concluded that machines are going to take over roughly 47% of those jobs, of today's jobs. Coincidentally, that works out to right around 2 billion. So thank you, Oxford. That was nice. But that's not the whole story. See, we're not automating entire jobs out of existence. We're automating tasks out of existence. So if you're a person that reads the meters, like on the top left up there, he goes out and reads the water meter, the electric meter. Once we're able to send that information in wirelessly, then suddenly that job gets redefined. The meter reader would do things other than just reading the meters, and so the job itself gets redefined and it can be done with fewer people, but the job itself doesn't completely go away. So this is, we have it in our heads that it's us versus the robots, it's us versus AI, when it's actually us with them. So this is an example of a person with an exoskeleton on, and this person here is able to accomplish 3 times as much in the average day as somebody without this exoskeleton. So on one hand, we're eliminating jobs, the other hand, we're freeing up human capital. But just because our jobs disappear doesn't mean we've run out of work to do. That's fairly preposterous. As long as we have problems in the world, we're always going to have work to do. So we can now think faster, know faster, and do faster than ever before in history. So where's our next generation jobs going to come from? They're going to come from future industries. Now, when I talk about future industries, I like to focus on what I refer to as the disruptive 8. These are 8 technologies that are going to reach out and touch the lives of every person on planet Earth over the next couple decades. The first one we'll talk about is artificial intelligence and how that's going to affect education. See, this is the event that I was speaking at in Istanbul in 2012. It was a TEDx event, and I was speaking about teacherless education. Now, after I finished my talk, one of the executives from Google came up to me and he said that we're very interested in teacherless education because we want to educate Africa and teachers don't want to go to Africa. Now, this is a very revealing moment for me because no teachers don't want to go to Africa. They don't want to go to Siberia. They don't want to go to Antarctica. There's lots of places in the world that teachers don't want to go. In fact, we have a global shortage of teachers, of 69 million teachers shortage around the world right now. And a full 23% of all kids growing up in the world don't go to any school whatsoever. And if we continue to have to insert a teacher between us and everything we have to learn in the future, we can't possibly learn things fast enough to keep up with the demands of the future. So we're living in a radically changing world, and the demographics of the world is just shifting dramatically. Now, one of the big issues in Korea right now is that you're not having enough children. There are very few babies being born in Korea. In fact, a total of half of all the world's population right now is being born in 6 countries. 6 countries in the world. Most countries have stopped having kids. These 6 countries are having tons of kids. And so the 6 countries include Nigeria, Congo, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Angola, and Pakistan. That's right, half of all the babies born in the world are born in these countries. And these are countries with some of the poorest education systems on the planet. So even though they have the poorest education system, every kid wakes up in the morning and has access to a smartphone. They might live in a dirt hut in the middle of Africa, but they have access to smartphones. And these people are becoming a much more fluid part of society than ever before in the past. They're not just going to stay in Africa. They're going to move all over the planet. So by 2050, the way the demographics are shifting right now, the most populous country in the world in 2050 will be India, followed by China, followed by Nigeria, followed by the United States, followed by Pakistan, Congo, Indonesia, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Egypt. This is a radically changing landscape for the world. Now, the role of education is changing. It's no longer possible to predict the educational needs of business 4 to 5 years in advance. It's just simply not possible. We're currently preparing students for jobs that don't exist, using technology that hasn't been invented to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet. This kind of sums up the whole complex issue of how do we train people for the future, for a future we don't understand yet. So the average person entering the workforce in 2030, we've projected out that that person will have to reboot their career roughly 8 to 10 times throughout their working life. Now, somebody who has to shift gears that often will want to do the retraining in the least amount of time, not the most. And so traditional colleges will be a very poor fit for that type of retraining. If you look at this idea of when Facebook bought Oculus Rift in 2014, they paid $2 billion for this company, and there was this instant uptick in a demand for virtual reality designers, coders, experience creators, and nobody was teaching it. Certainly nobody was teaching the Oculus Rift version. So artificial intelligence has been coming out of the woodwork, and we're standing on the brink of this revolution in technology. This is technology that's been brewing for many decades, and research laboratories, colleges, research centers everywhere, and it's finally coming to a head, what we understand as AI today. So there's several industries that are taking the lead in using little bits and pieces. This is what's known as narrow AI. This narrow AI is growing up, and we're hearing all these headlines all the time that self-taught AI beats doctors at predicting heart attacks. I think that's a good thing. AI is learning what makes you cry at movies. It also will understand what makes you buy in a retail setting. AI is able to convert images of food into a list of ingredients. There's very handy tools with this. Estonia is planning AI-powered robot judges to replace human judges. AI can predict when somebody will die with unsettling accuracy. We could probably skip that one. That's not a good one. Microsoft views the human genome as just another coding language. This one's rather interesting because Microsoft is actually investing billions and billions of dollars into this idea that in the future, if you get sick, that rather than give you pills to take care of your problem, they'll just upload an algorithm in you. Maybe that'll work, maybe not. But they believe that within less than a decade, they can cure cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and a number of other huge issues. More power to them if they can do that. But this led to my light bulb moment. And it has to do with DeepMind. Google bought this company. It's a British company called DeepMind a few years ago. And they decided to test it out. This is an artificial intelligence company. They decided to test out how good it would be. And they applied it to an Atari 2600 game called Breakout. And they give it very few instructions other than to maximize the score. So this is what it looked like to have DeepMind playing against Breakout after 30 minutes. It was still losing, it was still really bad at it, but it was learning as it was going. So after 2 hours, it had mastered the game, even at a high rate of speed, and this is what that looked like. And then after 4 hours, it figured out the optimal strategy. It figured out a way to shoot a ball around the outside in a way that even the designers of the game didn't know was possible. And so this is what that looks like. I always hate to play against people like this because they're so much better. But then they decided to test DeepMind against 49 other Atari 2600 games, and in each situation, it learned how to master the game. So then it occurred to me that if we apply AI to a teacher bot, the new game becomes to figure out ways to teach students faster and faster than ever before. So over time, AI is going to learn every student's proclivities, their idiosyncrasies, their preferred tools, personal references, and how to keep them engaged in learning in the face of lots of distractions. It will quickly learn what skills you're deficient in, what it's going to take to bring you up to speed, how and when to schedule your training, and when you've mastered the new topic. So it'll know when things are working, when things are not working, and it'll know when you've mastered a new skill. So throughout this learning curve, we're going to be learning faster and faster and faster. This idea that you can learn something 2 times faster, 4 times faster, maybe even 10 times faster. The idea that you could learn an entire college degree in less than a month might be possible in the future. So my prediction is that by 2030, the largest company on the internet is going to be an education-based company that we haven't heard of yet. This will be larger than Google, larger than Facebook, larger than Apple. And that as soon as somebody cracks the code on this, I think this is the largest opportunity nobody's quite cracked the code for. As soon as it happens, it's going to scale very quickly and take off like a rocket. This is also going to create tons of micro industries. Our AI-enhanced human app builders, AI training systems for business, AI traffic control systems, AI warning systems, and just much more. And throughout all of this, it's going to create tons of new jobs. Self-assessment auditors, data contextualists, deficiency analyzers, school designers, policy advisors, career transitionists, goal counselors, student relationship managers, mentors, coaches, counselors, and just so much more. So throughout this presentation, I will pose these questions, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. But this is to get your mind thinking about this. So given the pace of future change, the genesis of new industries and the disruption of the present, what talent needs will we have for the future, and how will we acquire the necessary new knowledge and skills to keep pace and adapt? And then this is going to be a reoccurring question I'm going to keep asking you, is that how pervasive will AI be in the future, and how will it affect education systems and processes in 10 to 20 years? More importantly, what jobs will it eliminate, and what new jobs will it create, and what new skills will be needed for the people in the future? Now, these are open-ended questions that we don't currently have answers for. All right, let's look at driverless technology here. So, every time I look at something about the future, I have to I struggle with what's important and what isn't. Because I hear about discoveries, I hear about new advancements, I hear about new startup businesses with new technologies, and I look at it and I say, wow, this is going to change everything, and then nothing happens. In fact, this idea of nothing happens most of the time. So all of this innovative new technology needs to ride into the marketplace on the back of some company, some business entity, and that's where lots of failures take place. So when I'm looking at all of this technology that's coming out of the woodwork, I have to decide what's getting traction. And this is how I separate the good intentions from the game-changing technology. So one of the technologies that's getting lots of traction right now is autonomous vehicles. In fact, the most successful product launch in all history was when Elon Musk announced the Tesla Model 3. He announced the Tesla Model 3, and just in a few weeks, then suddenly 450,000 people put down money to get on a waiting list for a car that they had never seen and they knew virtually nothing about. This is the epitome of the super successful product launch. But I have to remind people that the cars that we drive today have actually been in development for the past 120 years. So it's taken that long to get to cars that are this good. 20, 30 years ago, the cars were not this good. And so let's put this in perspective. For the last 120 years, people that have been designing cars have been designing cars around this one central function, around driving. This idea of what it takes to drive a car. So as we move into the driverless era, people will no longer drive. So that's an important piece here, because everything that they've been studying in the past, these car designers, they've been focused on the human relationship to the steering wheel, the human relationship to the dashboard, to the gas pedals. All of that goes out the window, and we focus on everything else that happens in the car other than driving. So that brings up this real interesting question: is it the same job? If you're a car designer today and you're not focused on driving, is it the same job? This is a real critical question, because 20 years from now, we're still going to have doctors, teachers, lawyers, nurses. But the tools they use are going to be vastly different than anything we're using today. And so you have to ask that same question: is it the same job? Is it the same profession? Now, a few months ago, I wrote this column on 128 things that will disappear in the driverless car era. Lots of things are going to go away. And so this is what it's like in a driverless car today. Naturally, this is speeded up, but if you think about the guy with his hands on his lap on the left over there, the real nervous guy there, it's really important, because before we get into the driverless era, we have to have a level of trust before we're going to start jumping into these vehicles. And we're not quite there yet. So eventually we'll get there. But some of the missing elements is we don't have connectedness everywhere, Wi-Fi everywhere. So some of the decisions are made on the car itself, some of them are made in the cloud. And so if I'm driving through the mountains and the car in front of me hits a deer, I need to know about that in my car really, really right away. If it goes up to a satellite or something, comes back down, and it takes 10 seconds, that's way too long. So we don't have this system right now. We've got to get there. But there's a lot of work being done to make that happen. Samsung has plans to send out 4,800 satellites into space. Starlink, which is a SpaceX company, plans to send up 12,000 satellites. Amazon plans to send up a huge number of satellites, and there are several other companies as well. So we're going to have tons of satellites over the next few years floating around the Earth, giving us space-to-Earth connections to the internet. Now, cars themselves become rolling data centers. The whole car loan industry starts to disappear over the coming decades. The car insurance industry starts to disappear. Now, in the United States, 86% of the cars on the road just have one person in them. So very likely, the people that are owning fleets of cars will design cars that just have room for one person, make it much more economical. When parking lots start to disappear, buildings will get redesigned around what's called queuing stations, spaces for the cars to queue up for people to get in and out of. Looks like electric cars are going to dominate, and eventually, somewhere around 2030 to 2035, we'll start seeing the first highways that are designated as driverless only. So the life expectancy of cars is going to go down dramatically, because if a car is picking somebody up and dropping them off and picking somebody else up and dropping them off 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they can put on a lot of miles really soon. And in less than a year, that car's probably going to be wore out. We don't know what the life expectancy is going to be exactly, but we're going to have this rather rapid iteration, a changeover, as these cars get used heavily and then get disposed of. One autonomous car should replace roughly 30 traditional cars. Now, this affects so many different things. In the US, the average airport, 41% of the revenue comes from parking and transportation fees. That's similar in most major cities around the world. All of that starts to dwindle and disappear. We have lots of consequences of distracted driving. I don't know what the exact numbers are here, but in the US, every year we have roughly 40,000 deaths from car accidents. We have 4.5 million injuries. We spend right at $500 billion repairing people after car accidents. $500 billion a year. That's $1 out of every $6 in our healthcare industry is spent fixing people after car accidents. We've just grown to accept that. The safest form of transportation in the world today is the airline industry. If we can get even close to that, that paints a radically different picture. We're going to save tons and tons of lives. Cities tend to get a lot of tax revenue coming off of the sale of cars. That's going to dwindle and disappear. Roughly 10% of retail is dedicated to car sales, all the tire shops, the brake shops, the parts stores, even the gas stations, the dealerships, all of those will start to dwindle over time. Traffic violations are going to dry up, so we won't have near as much revenue coming in from that. So teenagers are going to be some of the early adopters, and parents are going to prefer that. But things go wrong. I mean, how can anything go wrong with teenagers? They're so reliable. At what age is it okay to put a child in a car by themselves? If I have a car that will recognize a parent on one end and a teacher on the other end, can I put a 6-year-old child in a car to go to school by themselves, and for how long? Is 10 minutes okay? Is 30 minutes too long? There's lots of interesting policy issues that haven't been discussed yet. This idea of platooning, the early adopters in the driverless world are going to be the trucking industry, because we can have a driver in the first truck and we can have 3 robotic trucks behind it. That saves 75% of the labor costs in trucking. And so that raises a bunch of other issues though. But look for this to be happening very soon. Now, as we start creating autonomous vehicles, this opens the door for so many other opportunities. And this idea of having retail stores that are driverless and mobile as opposed to stationary stores, that just changes so many things. So what does it look like to have a driverless mobile retail world? So if you think about sometime late in the evening and you need something from the store and you're faced with this idea of, well, I have to get dressed and go out to the store to get this thing, or you could have the store come to you. Now, there's nobody in the store because it's all automated. So you can go into the store in your pajamas, and even though there's 82 cameras looking at you, you can go in there, your pajamas, get what you need, walk out, and it takes off again. That's a very likely scenario in the very near future here. But it's not just storefronts. We can have mobile offices. We can have mobile conferences. We can go around a city and pick up people for a meeting, a conference that we're going to have. We can have a cooking school that goes around and picks up people for students for the cooking school. We can have mobile hair shops, mobile dog grooming places, mobile banking systems. And yes, these mobile banks can go to people rather than forcing people to come to the banks. bicycle repair, bicycle rental places, mobile nail shops and hair shops, coffee shops, lots of mobile retail. And sometimes the merchandise is inside the vehicle, sometimes it's on the outside or a combination of both. But this is going to get very creative as these things evolve. Would you buy a pie from the Prime Minister? Having a party anywhere that you want, all of a sudden you send out a notice to all your friends and they all come and show up in some remote location, and you can have a mobile bar, mobile dance floor, just all of this mobile entertainment sets up spontaneously in remote locations. So the big difference is traditional stores spend tons of money to get people to come to them. Now the big difference is that these mobile businesses can go to where the people are. Anytime there's a softball tournament, anytime there's a soccer tournament, anytime there's a parade down Main Street, any gathering of people, these things can show up and be doing business. If you want to hold a conference like this one in some remote location, you can summon 500 hotel rooms to come there and set up, and you can hold your event, and then the next day they go someplace else. If you think about these being used as mobile hospital beds with all the equipment in them, those emergency services can show up any place that there's a tsunami or an earthquake or any natural disaster. They can all show up and be ready to help people out. The idea of the mall of the future can be just a large open building, and every morning they open the doors and you have a unique group of people that comes and sets up shop that day. This would be fun because it's a different configuration of businesses, different configuration of people every single day. And if you're a mobile business, you can go from one spot in the city to another, to another, to another, and you can have this whole circuit and just show up in each spot maybe once every 2 weeks. The mobile food truck industry today is paving the way for a much larger industry. The big thing that's missing is what I call a GeoSmart cash register, the idea that it will understand exactly where you're at any given moment and charge the right amount of taxes for that location. If somebody can invent this, there's a huge demand for it. The way I think about this is once it calculates out what the taxes are, then it automatically remits a micropayment, a blockchain-based micropayment to that taxing authority with every single transaction. And that takes all the work out of it for the merchant. The way I look at this is that driverless technology is going to be the most disruptive technology in all history. I think it will be more disruptive than the invention of the wheel, the invention of electricity, or the invention of the car itself, because it will disrupt a larger population in a shorter period of time. Largely because we have more people on planet Earth and because technology is moving so much quicker. But this is going to be hugely disruptive. This is going to open the door for tons of micro industries, driverless delivery services, mobile retail storefronts, mobile medical services, mobile gaming salons, and just so much more. At the same time, we're going to be creating tons of future jobs. Delivery dispatchers, traffic monitoring systems, planners, designers and operators, automated traffic architects and engineers, driverless ride experience designers, driverless operating system engineers, emergency crews for when things go wrong, and things will always go wrong. This is what an intersection will look like in the driverless era. Looks like fun, doesn't it? But again, I'm asking the same questions. How much of today's business world will be affected by driverless technology in 10 to 20 years? And what jobs will it eliminate? what new jobs will it create, and what new skills will be needed. All right, our trillion sensor movement. In 2013, this gentleman, Dr. Janis Burzek, was the vice president of Fairchild Semiconductors, and he held an event in San Francisco called the Trillion Sensor Summit. Now, he asked the people that were participating in it, how long would it be before we reached the first trillion sensors in the world? He concluded that we're going to reach the first trillion sensors in the world somewhere around 2012, and that by 2022, I mean, and that by 2036, we're going to have 100 trillion sensors in the world. Now, what this means is that the sensors, the things that will sense everything from light and heat and moisture and actually millions of different possibilities, the sensors are becoming very tiny, very ubiquitous, very easy to mass produce. And we're going to start embedding sensors in coatings. We'll embed sensors in paint. We'll embed sensors in our clothing. We'll paint our bridges. We'll paint our walls with them. And suddenly we'll have information coming from everywhere. This looks like a very simple skin patch here, but it's actually a very sophisticated piece of technology with lots of information coming and going. The first smartphone, the first iPhone that came out in 2007 had 5 sensors in it. Today, the average smartphone has over 20 sensors in it, and that number is going up. The number of sensors in a smartphone is roughly doubling every 4 years. So my prediction is we're going to reach the first trillion sensors in the world in 2022, and this is going to create tons of micro industries, sensor installers, sensor data marketplaces, design studios, repair shops, and just so much more. The Internet of Things. Now, the Internet of Things is a term that was invented somewhere between 2008 and 2009. That's when the company Cisco decided that the number of devices connected to the internet would started to exceed the number of people on planet Earth. 6.8 billion people, 6.8 billion devices. Now the projections are we're going to reach, 25, 30 billion next year. But for the past 2 decades, we've been trying to build this digital infrastructure over everything physical in the world. And it wasn't until we discovered the idea of blockchain that we had an overall idea of what the architecture for that should be. Now, blockchain isn't the complete answer, it's a piece of a much larger equation. And now we have the introduction of 5G, and 5G is changing lots of things. It's not just about speed, though. We always think of 5G about speed, but it's much more than that. It's pervasiveness, capacity, durability, human interface, dimensionality, privacy, intelligence, and so much more. But what 5G is this is the ultimate tool for entrepreneurs, because 5G is adding huge amounts of computing power to the edges of our distributed networks. One way I like to think about this is it adds, if you can think about the tip of a toothbrush, it adds enough computing power to compute whether or not you have a safe toothbrush to use in the morning. So we're talking back and forth to our devices. And when we're talking back and forth to our devices, this is building the brains of the robot. Now, if we think about the brains of the robot, maybe the robot is actually a driverless car, maybe the robot is a flying drone, maybe it's an actual robot. But as we talk back and forth to these devices, whether it's an Amazon device, a Microsoft device, an Apple device, a Samsung device, whatever it might be, it's going to get smarter over time. And then we're going to be able to ask very complicated questions like, hey, what beer am I in the mood for today? So with the Internet of Things, we're trying to connect all the things that we're not connected to in the past. All of these inanimate objects in our cities, in our counties, in our rural areas, we're going to be able to tie them all together in such interesting ways. In January, at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, I ran into this company that was selling smart jeans. And I thought, wow, this is like a really stupid product here. But then I found out how it worked. And if you're walking down the street and you're supposed to turn right, it'll buzz on the right side. If you're supposed to turn left, it'll buzz on the left side. So everywhere you go, you have a little GPS in your pants. L'Oreal is making hairbrushes that will listen to the sound the bristles make as they pass through your hair. And it can tell if you have dry hair, cracked, split ends, and it will recommend shampoos and conditioners for you. Baidu is making smart chopsticks to make sure that your food is safe to eat. I love this one. This is really smart. It looks like a regular salt and pepper shaker, but what it does is it scans a plate of food in front of you. It'll tell you how much you weigh before you eat that plate of food and how much you're going to weigh afterwards. The biometric coffee maker here. This thing's really smart. You get up in the morning, you put your hand on it, and it knows exactly how much caffeine should go in your coffee. We think it should have a Jack Daniel's switch on it too. This is the IC Pooch. This is a great device. If you have dogs or pets at home, you can remotely dispense food for your pet. And then while they're eating, you can FaceTime them. So if you have pets at home and you're not FaceTiming them now, then well, shame on you. This right here is a VR helmet for chickens. And naturally this begs the question that if the chicken thinks it's a free-range chicken, is it? So my prediction is that 10% of the world's population will be wearing clothing connected to the internet by 2024. This is just right around the corner. This is going to happen very soon. And that this is going to open the door for tons of micro industries. IoT, smart building installers, smart clothing developers, health monitors, proximity alert systems, and just so much more. At the same time, it's going to create lots of new jobs. Sensor inventors, designers and engineers, lifestyle optimizers, data stream organizers, failure point assessors, data transmission optimizers, system anthropologists, data actuaries, just so much more. So once again, I'll ask the same question. How dramatically will your life be affected by sensors and the Internet of Things devices in 10 to 20 years? What jobs will this eliminate? What new jobs will it create? And what new skills will be needed? All right, flying drones. And this will be the last topic that we go through today here. Flying drones. It occurred to me that with a flying drone, every time you add a new feature to it, it gives it new capabilities. So what additional capabilities come from adding sensors to a drone, or speakers, or microphones, or infrared filters? What extra things can you do if you add robotic arms to a drone? How about if you add lasers to a drone? How about if you add wheels to a drone and you can drive it on the ground as well as fly it in the sky? How about a tow line? We're going to have lots of pranks pulled with flying drones as well. Emergency rescue drones. So we have the ability today to eliminate forest fires altogether. We can scan any area of land and look for hotspots. We can have drones flying overhead, and as soon as so fires are very easy to put out when they're really tiny. But once they turn into a huge blaze like this, they're really complicated to deal with. So once we spot a little hotspot inside of a forest or out on the plains, a brush fire, we can then suddenly signal for an emergency drone to fly in with a fire extinguisher to put it out. In the future, we're going to be using sound waves to put out fires. But every time somebody calls into the city with an emergency, the first response for the city will be to get eyes on it, to send out a drone to see what's going on. So if there's an avalanche happening, which could happen up here in the mountains, if an avalanche happens, the first response will be to put drones out there rather than put people in harm's way. News organizations are going to race to be first to see who can get live coverage of any incident happening in a city, whatever that incident might be. Emergency beer drones? All right, drones for agriculture. With agriculture is going to be one of the early adopters. We're going to be able to monitor crops a long ways away, even in a different country. We're going to be able to apply herbicides and pesticides with these machines. We can scan the fields and scan for diseases and for bugs and for fertilizer content and moisture. We can monitor livestock a long ways away. We can look for birds that are damaging a crop, how badly they're damaging it. We can do an assessment of an entire field, and a farmer can just go out there and scan the field and get an instant idea of what's going on in that field. All of this information is changing the way agriculture is working in the future. And then that gives rise to autonomous tractors and autonomous vehicles on the farm. This is an autonomous harvester that somebody imagined, but I don't think it really works. The idea of maintenance drones, the idea that we can use drones to monitor problems that are really difficult to get to, like on the top of windmills, close to high voltages. We can inspect the structural integrity of different things. We can do thermal scans on buildings. We can monitor the construction of buildings a long ways away. All these remote construction projects are very easy to monitor. Emergency medical devices. These drones are going to be coming out of the woodwork very soon. So if somebody has a heart attack on a golf course, they're a long ways away from any medical service, but we can have a defibrillator drone that flies in and you can shock that person back to health again. Maybe that'll work. If there's a big fire on a crowded highway, rather than trying to get emergency vehicles there, we can fly an ambulance drone in. There's companies working on these ambulance drones. They're not quite ready for prime time, but they're getting very close. So we're quickly moving from one-off hobbyist drones that we have today to fleets of drones. This idea that in the future, every police department will have its own fleet of drones. Every city will have a fleet of drones. Every college campus, every news organization, every forestry department, national parks, construction companies, farmers, they're all going to have their own fleets of drones. And this will give rise to drone command centers. Now, we don't know what a drone command center is going to look like. Maybe something like this. We don't even know what skills are going to be required to operate it. But these are coming because we have lots of drones that are coming out of the woodwork. This is an actual ghost plane that was created by a swarm of 800 drones at an air show recently. This is kind of this new level. In just a couple years, 800 drones will be multiplied to probably 10,000 drones. What's that going to look like? If we assume that every major city in the world will someday have 50,000 drones flying overhead, that brings up lots of interesting questions. What's the role and responsibility of the city for managing these drones? And then what's the legal privacy barriers that are going to protect the people from drones? Who has the right to shoot a drone out of the air? We haven't answered this question yet. More importantly, when do we have an obligation to shoot a drone out of the air? Sometimes the drones are menacing, they're causing problems. This happens to be a drone that's burning trash off of a power line. But how do we know if it's burning trash off of a power line or trying to cut through the power line? And who makes that decision? We haven't had any of these discussions yet. So how do we create drone policies around these things? Cities and counties are going to start employing huge fleets of drones. And as these drones fly overhead, they're going to scan all the buildings and all the hillsides, and they're going to start creating digital models of the community. And over time, these digital models are going to get better and better. And this is going to give rise to search engines for the physical world. Very soon, we're going to be able to search the physical world just like we search the digital world today. Now, with this technology, it'll give rise to searching for attributes that we can't even think about today. I want something that smells like this. I want something that tastes like that. I want something with this harmonic vibration, with this specific gravity, with something with this texture, with this harmonic vibration. We don't have to know how it's working. All we have to know is that when I put in a search query for where is that dog with rabies right now, it'll give me the right results. What's the heaviest traffic intersection in the city today? How much damage did that tornado cause to City Hall? How close did John Doe get to Jane Doe yesterday, if there are people that are at loggerheads? Infrastructure reports, what's the most dangerous bridge in the city today? Now, very quickly, this is going to open the door for drone taxis. Now, we're seeing lots of activity. There's dozens of companies that are trying to enter the drone taxi space. Now, I'm going to show you a quick video here. This is Airbus. They haven't quite created the perfect one of these yet, but it's coming. Looks like fun, doesn't it? Now, as we have more and more drones flying in and out of cities, this will give rise to mini airports. Now, initially you're going to think, well, if I can just pull out to a street, I can just take off anywhere. It's not the way it's going to work, because they need to manage the airspace. And so we're going to start seeing mini airports develop around cities. Now, what they're going to look like, we don't even know yet. There's lots of people thinking about mini airports, though, and I think all of the helipads we have today will probably get replaced with these mini airports. They will all have a terminal building and maybe 6 to 8 landing spots on them. But my prediction is that search engines for the physical world will be common by 2028. In that we will reach the first billion drones in the world by 2030, 2032, somewhere in that range. In that drone taxis will be a common form of transportation by 2030, that's just 10 years from now. And this is going to give rise to tons of micro industries. drone agriculture scanners, drone maintenance companies, drone rescue services, taxi services, and so much more. At the same time, we got a lot of jobs that are going to go away. The surveyor jobs, delivery service, search and rescue, policemen, firemen, power line inspectors. Lots of these jobs are going to disappear. At the same time, we're going to be creating lots of new jobs. Drone command center operators, data analysts, drone pilot trainers, operator certification, privacy monitors, drone traffic optimizers, and just so much more. Once again, there's these same questions. How dramatically will your life be affected by flying drones in the next 10 to 20 years? And what jobs will be eliminated? And what new jobs will they create? And what new skills will be needed to operate in the future? So I'm going to open this up for questions here. So this is my latest book, Epiphany Z. But I would like to open it up for questions, and so whatever you're thinking right now, let's talk through it.